So, good evening. Tonight, I'm going to talk to you about dying. And if you've come out to the Bavard for a social evening, you have your glass of wine, and you're sitting there thinking, well, didn't I luck out tonight? 15 minutes of dying, then I apologise. But actually, I only half apologise. And that is because I believe it is really important that we all talk about dying. And that's because with dying, we only have one chance to get it right. So, stay with me, take a sip of your drink, and contemplate this. Every single one of you is going to die. It's not going to be light. And don't just think, oh yeah, I know, I'm going to die. But really go there. Every single one of us is going to die. And every single one of us in our lifetime is going to experience the death of somebody that we love. And so, dying matters. And some of you may already be aware that this week is in fact Dying Matters Week. And Dying Matters Week is actually a national initiative which is around encouraging people to talk about death, dying, bereavement, and making our wishes known. So, ahead of Dying Matters Week, they undertook some research, and it was really to explore some of these themes. And I'm going to share a few points with you now. So, 55% of people still prefer to say past or passing instead of dead or dying. Think about what you say. 35% of the adults asked had made a will, which means that 65% had not. Only 7% of the people asked had actually written down what they would want in the case that they were unable to make their own decisions. And just a quarter, 25%, had actually asked a family member about their end-of-life wishes. So if we don't talk about this stuff, then how do we think that it's going to happen? And if we can't even say that somebody has died, how are we possibly going to talk about our own death and what we might want? So why are we as a society just so uncomfortable with talking about death and dying? Well, I would suggest some of the answers lie if you look back at the history of dying. So if we go back 100 years to the beginning of the century, death looked very different from today. Death happened at home. By the time most people were in their childhood, they had had an experience of death, and death was very intertwined with life. Back then, most people died around the age 48 for women and 44 for men. And if you think about what people were dying from, what do you think the causes were? So if we look back, 10% of people dying in their childhood, and leading causes of death were infectious diseases. So measles was up there as the leading cause of death for children. But if you think about these conditions, they're not things that we would expect to be dying from today. So what has changed? If we fast forward to 1975, over that period of time, we have seen significant changes in basic hygiene as a starting point. We've had developments in our medical treatments. We've had the introduction of vaccinations and antibiotics. And so you see in the bluer lines far less deaths in childhood. Most of us at this point expecting to survive well into our 80s. And so if you think that today there are over 14,000 centenarians, that's people over 100, living in the UK. Any guess for which of the countries they're in? In the UK? Wales, actually. Wales leading on the oldest people. And that number is increasing exponentially. So we can all hopefully expect to die in our 80s. And what do you think that you'll be dying of? So, leading cause of death for older people as we project forward are chronic conditions. So, these are things like heart failure, respiratory disease, I feel like I've got a bit of that, cancer, which has become a chronic condition. People are living with cancer for many years now. And of course, dementia on the rise. And the trajectory or the journey of these sorts of conditions looks really quite different. So it's not an acute infectious illness which people suddenly die of. It's much more likely that in our last year of life, we have a deterioration in our function and our health, punctuated by significant dips, significant deteriorations, which may well involve an admission to hospital. Now, some of you may have supported people on this sort of pathway, and they go into hospital really quite unwell, and the team talk to the family and the patients say, actually, we don't know how they're going to come through this. Things are looking very serious. But what happens is that they resurrect, they bounce back almost to the same level of function, and they continue. And by the time this has happened a few times, nobody really believes that they're going to die. None of the family think that they're going to die. And when that death does happen, in any one of these dips, it comes as a surprise, even though it shouldn't. So if you think about that pathway, where do you think these 80-year-olds are dying? Is it at home? It's in hospital. And today, the majority of people die in hospital. Where do you think the majority of people would like to die?
In the pub.
In the pub. I like it. And the Bavard bar. Don't do it. I'm not recommending it. So, take a moment now and think about where you would like to die. And I'm going to get you to put your hands up for this. The options are home, hospice, or hospital. So, any votes for hospital? Any votes for hospice? And any votes for home? All right. First question, okay, first question is, if that's where you'd like to die, have you told anybody? Second question is, if you are 80, in reality, where do you think you'll actually be dying? The answer is probably a care home. So, some of you may be wondering why I have chosen to talk about death as my topic at the Bavard Bar. And I am interested in death. I'm fascinated by death. And that's part of the reason why I work at St. Michael's Hospice. Now, St. Michael's Hospice is your local hospice. It is literally 5 minutes around the corner up on Upper Maze Hill. And St. Michael's care and support people across all of Hastings and Rother. My role as at St. Michael's is that I'm a physiotherapist by background, and I am the Director of Wellbeing Services, so a member of the leadership team. And I find it interesting to look back that when I'm in social situations where I'm at a new dinner party, for example, talking to people that I haven't met before, and they're making small talk with me, and they say, "So what do you do for your work?" And I say, "Actually, I work in a hospice." And they say, "Oh, so like a bit like a hospital?" And I say, "Well, yes, a bit like a hospital, but I work with people that are seriously ill, and many of them are actually dying." And what I found is that this can be quite a conversation stopper. So, over time, and I've been working in this field for 12 years now, I can neatly classify people into 3 groups when I have this conversation. The first will suddenly need to urgently go to the bathroom or get another drink, and they exit the conversation. The second will look at me and say, "You must be such an amazing person to do this sort of work. I think it really must take an angel to work in a hospice. I couldn't do it." And then they suddenly need to go to the bathroom or go and get another drink. But the third group are a group that actually are very interested in talking about dying. And I'm hoping, because you haven't left yet, that you fall into this category. And for this group, it's actually people that are thinking about dying and may really welcome an opportunity to talk about it, but never do because they think nobody else is comfortable with talking about it. And because I work in a hospice, I must be okay with that. So I've had some really interesting conversations. I've also encountered people who are the opposite end of the spectrum, who love talking about dying, are passionate about dying, and are particularly often interested in life after death. And I also found that quite fascinating and thought when I started working in a hospice, I would learn what happened after we die. Wouldn't that be interesting to know? Wouldn't you think, working with dying people every day, that you would come to know that? And I do know a lot about dying. I know about the process of dying. I know about how one's body slowly slows down, how we stop eating, stop drinking, we become less mobile. We spend more time sleeping until we may drift in and out of consciousness and eventually take that last breath. I also know about dead bodies. I see dead bodies in my work. And I can remember in my first job at a hospice in London, I'd only been there a couple of days when my boss said, "The patient that you saw yesterday has actually died, and we're going to go in and see them." And I, having been out the night before on a work night, thought, "Oh my goodness, I'm not sure if I can really cope with this." But we went in, and for anyone that has ever seen a dead body, the woman was lying on the bed very peacefully. She had a sprig of flowers on the pillow beside her head, and she looked very, very calm. And I felt that the energy, the spirit, the whatever you want to call it, the life force, had left her body. And still, I kept waiting for her to move, or maybe to take another breath. And it's quite a surreal feeling. I also know about grief, and the grief of the people that are left behind, and how difficult that can be. But I have to say, I still do not know what happens when we die, and I think that that is the ultimate mystery. So, one of the things that I do know from working in a hospice is just how important living is. And living is at the heart of the work that I lead at St. Michael's. And what I'd like you to do now is take a moment and contemplate these 2 questions. So I'm not going to ask you to share it, but I want you to think about what is most important to you? What matters to you? And I want you to think about, what would you like to do right up until that last moment when you die? And now I'm going to play you a short film of us asking some people that are under the support of a hospice what they say.
The things that are most important in my day-to-day life is maintaining my independence, to interact with people, to see people. I've got a family holiday that I really want to go on.
I would tell you something now. I would like to get up and walk.
To do my job on my own. I don't like it. To somebody to watch me. I like to do the laundrette, but not to put me in the bath to clean me. You understand me?
A bit of happiness in trying to be able to look after myself a bit better.
Some days I can't stand and I cook sitting down. I prepare the vegetables and whatever I got prepared, and I manage. I do it. I'm determined to do it.
Yeah, I like spending time with my family. I like being able to do things for myself and being independent, and that's when I'm at my happiest.
To live to the death of your child.
So just consider how their answers might compare to what you would say. And one of the things to realise is that every single person in that video, except for one, had died within 6 months of that film. And one of them was over 100. So, our work at St. Michael's is around shifting the perception. People are often afraid about being referred to a hospice. They believe it's just about dying. But we have a very comprehensive team that supports this focus. The questions I've just asked you: what matters to you, and what would you like to do in the next short while? People are often surprised at the scope of support that we offer at St. Michael's or in a hospice. People tend to think of doctors and nurses, but this is our holistic team, and this is so that we can provide truly holistic support. Many people are actually surprised to know there's a gym at the hospice. We rehabilitate people, and that is about enabling people to live life as fully as possible. So I know if I had asked you at the beginning, what word jumps into your head when you hear hospice, you would probably be in the dying camp. And I hope that after tonight, you will also begin to associate hospice with enabling people to live life as fully as possible. I hope that you will join me in recognising that dying matters, and you're not quite off the hook, because I want to leave you with some inspiration for talking over the break. Don't wait until you're dying to talk about it, because that is too late.